call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, May 12th. The time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of the community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hellman, we have some items in the table file. Will you update us?
Yes, we have several items in the table file this evening. There's an overnight field trip request for the Envirothon state competition. Congratulations to the Envirothon students for advancing. And then there are quite a few personnel items, appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, as well as some retirements and resignations. That's the table file for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Okay, moved by Jeff. Can I have a second? Second by Jenny. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3 is our public comment, and I believe we have individuals signed up, so I some comments to make before calling you up as public for public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, business, and/or property owners, parents, guardians, caregivers, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the chair, identify yourself and if you represent a group. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at a regular school board meeting. I will now begin to call you in the order that you have signed in. Vice Chair Corey Butler will be monitoring the speaker's time, and he will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 10-second intervals. Again, please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. Okay, we have 3 individuals who have signed up. Okay, so I'm calling up TJ Austin, FFA update, and Caden Wood and Lillian Dubon are joining you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is TJ Austin. I'm the Agricultural, Food, and Natural Resource Instructor and also the FFA Advisor. Here tonight to just thank you again for your continued support. 2 years in, doing very good. It's a building program. We have numbers increased in all of the classes. I did just get my work-based learning endorsement on top of my agricultural license to hopefully pursue something involving that, opportunities for students.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Caden Wood. I'm currently the Northfield FFA treasurer. I'm a senior at Northfield, and I will be going to pursue a degree in agriculture education and pre-vet at the University of Wisconsin River Falls. I've been part of the Northfield FFA for the past 2 years now. I want to thank you on behalf of my fellow chapter members for all the support that you have given the Northfield FFA. In the past 2 years, I've grown so much and made so many new connections. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and supporting the Northfield FFA.
Good evening. My name is Lily Dubon, your 2024-2025 student advisor for the Northfield FFA chapter, in which I would like to thank you for all your support you have given this year and years to come, in which I'm excited for next year as I'm hoping to apply for the secretary, as well as my sister will be able to join in this fun club as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Next, we have Andy Turn here.
Yes, hello.
Welcome.
I have a few comments about your agenda here with the presentation about the design progress you have from your Reimagine project. And I would like to remind you, there was in the letter, the July 17 letter of last year, where you got actually a green light to do this. There were a few conditions in there which said also competitive bidding. And he was also talking about efficient energy design and sustainability. I would like to address this. First of all, I would like, when I looked at that design, I said, this is not what I would like to see. I think there's time, there might be another opinion coming in and makes a representation about this, especially during the design stage, and then later on in the request for the proposal, that you have actually two firms competing in this. That would make sense to me. Then the second thing is about the efficiency and sustainability. There is a state law since 2007 actually, which says, which requires a certain reduction in EUIs. So that is your energy you're spending per square foot, which is right now on your Greenwell design about 40 kilobtu per square foot per year. And I would like to see a good statement in your presentation what your goals are. Without these goals, you're getting the same design what you got 7 years ago. I mean, this is time that you consider something like this to improve energy efficiency, that you set clear design goals for that. Like for the old part, 35 kilobtu, and for the new part, something like less than 25. So that means better insulation, and that means less load on your utilities. You don't want to shift the energy from one side to the other side, from your fossil fuels actually to electric. And it just is more expensive when you try to run the whole thing on electric. So I hope you can consider my request to get that implemented, to set clear goals, what that's supposed to be, and maybe also consider a second firm for the design and request for proposal. Thank you.
All right, our third speaker is Roger,
Don't bother. Don't worry.
what is the last name, Rajpal?
You can say Redschuber or Nachhuber if you want to say it in German, but don't stress your vocal cords.
Well,
Apologies, doctor. I don't even know whether this is the right way to address the board here. I already submitted an email. This is a petition to allow one more international student, to make the quota a little bit larger. We have excellent, very deep personal relationship to a student from Germany who currently is on the wait list for attending Northfield High School next year. He's an excellent student. I know that international students usually need more support. This is probably not the case in this case. He will have bilingual support in the family. Ich spreche ein wenig Deutsch, so German is not a problem there. And so, yeah, I would like you to consider that. I know right now I was told by the organization that runs this program that he's number one on the wait list. If you could allow one student more, that would be great. Thank you very much.
we're on to item 4, which is our announcements and recognitions.
Yes, we have a few this evening. As I mentioned before, we want to congratulate Northfield High School's and marathon team. They earned second place. All right. Let's start over. As we said before, we want to congratulate Northfield High School's Envirothon team for earning second place at the Southeast Minnesota Envirothon event, and they have qualified for the state competition on May 18th and 19th. And we now have a great feeder program as well. Northfield Middle School's Envirothon teams also did an outstanding job at the Southeast Minnesota Envirothon event. One team earned first place and the other team tied for second, eventually receiving third based on a tiebreaker. So congratulations to our Envirothon teams. FFA, we want to congratulate several people, including Keith Harner and Macy Mueller, who were awarded their state FFA degrees, which is an honor achieved only by 2% of FFA members statewide. That's a really prestigious honor. So congratulations to Keith and to Macy. We're also proud to recognize the following FFA members who qualified to compete in the state FFA competition. So congratulations to Molly Albers, Tavis Ballstedt, Carter Feldman, Keith Harner, Sam Harner, Grant Kraft, Allison Malika, Parker Malika, and Gavin Winters. So congratulations to our FFA students who are just really doing so well under our revitalized program. So thank you to Mr. Austin for his leadership. We want to congratulate Noah Marole. Noah placed fourth at the Minnesota State High School League speech tournament in the storytelling category. So congratulations to Noah. That's a very competitive event, and just really proud of Noah and all of the work this year. Finally, over $100,000 was awarded in the form of 100+ local scholarships at the Northfield High School Senior Awards last Wednesday. We're really proud of our senior class for their achievements, and we thank the generous scholarship donors and the Northfield community for their support. So those are your announcements for this evening.
Wonderful, great. Board members, do you have any announcements or recognitions at this time? Item 5 is our items for discussion and reports, and first up is the Reimagine Northfield High School update. Sal Bagley with Wool Architects will present. Welcome.
Good evening, board members. Thanks for having me. I'm Sal Bagley, and I'm here with my colleague Alex Malna. I'm another design team representative, along with several others who couldn't be here tonight, and we're very excited to present the progress. So we are going to talk about the process that has been used thus far and those who have been involved, of which several of you have. Then we will talk about the core planning group experience. So that's the input process we've been going through all throughout schematic design. We won't spend a ton of time talking about each individual guiding principle or design criteria, but really the philosophy behind the development of them. And I'll highlight a few particular. And then we'll end on the current design progress and what next steps look like. I don't expect everyone to be able to read this, but there was an oversight structure set in place similar to the last bond referendum to allow input to be involved and lots of stakeholders, but still have kind of clear responsibility around decision-making, budget, schedule, things like that. So at the top, obviously, we see the school board with ultimate responsibility. You all will have to be those who, for example, award bids after a competitive bid day. Then right below that, we have the project oversight committee, which we have several board member representatives on. We talk about the status of the project, talk about timeline, and then if there's a day to talk about budget or schedule or scope modifications, it would be that group. Then we had the core planning group who met for 8 meetings and went on some tours. I'll talk a lot about them today, but they helped us establish priorities, gave a lot of direction about vision for the facility. And then we also had an activities and athletics subcommittee who focused on a particular part of the project, important part. And they had 4 meetings and went on tours as well. I'll talk a little bit more at the very, very end, but we've just embarked on the user group process. We had, I think it was 3 days last week at the high school getting more input from each essentially space type or department. So here's just a graphic of that from an oversight perspective. The project oversight committee is really ultimately overseeing the entire project, but then we had that core planning group with user group and subcommittee input. This is a slide from our first core planning group meeting. So when we explain to a core planning group member, what are we asking of you? We're really asking them to be representative of their community and be confident in making recommendations. We told them we welcome you go talking to your colleagues, right? We don't have to have things in secret. So they would go talk to their colleagues, and we always left space at the beginning of the meeting for thoughts since last meeting of new ideas or questions, things like that. We spent a ton of time talking before we drew anything, which some people appreciated and some people wanted to get right to it. But we really like to establish those criteria, right? It's difficult. And we had a large core group, which is wonderful for input, but it meant that we had to spend extra time getting on the same page about what are we actually trying to accomplish. And then we did a lot of activities to make sure that all opinions were heard and respected, right? So there was a lot of small group activity or turn and talk and report out, things of that nature. And I would say we had wonderful attendance. We had very consistent attendance. Sometimes you see that there's a lot of energy at the beginning that tapers off, or they see that there may be one of, over 40 people, and so maybe their attendance isn't important, and we had wonderful attendance. The process for them, this is the overall trajectory. So early in the process, they got to go on tours, and I'll show you where they went on tours. And then we spend the middle 2 or 3 meetings coming to consensus on criteria and guiding principles. And then we spent really the back half of the process developing that common diagram. I did not want to forget to cover the other input that was opportunities that were provided to people. So on December 17th, there was an open session for all staff and also any broad community members who wanted to come share their input for the project. And then on January 13th and 27th, we were at the high school during the flex time, and we had lots of students stop by and give some thoughts. And then not to be unincluded, we were also at the middle school on January 23rd. And the questions on the left-hand side of this were just the prompts used. So essentially, what are your hopes and dreams for the project? And we broke it into categories, right? Learning spaces, safety, community or gathering spaces, maybe less building focus, but more people focus, the user experience, and then just general things that work well and don't work well. So we've got reams and reams of input that the core planning group was able to review and create some criteria out of. When it comes to schedule, I mentioned we've been at this for the last couple of months. So on the left-hand side here, you can see the 8 meetings that the core planning group had. They were approximately every 2 weeks, held from 4 to 6 in the high school media center. And then we did take advantage of the time to go on tours on January 21st and 22nd with that group. And I think almost all participate in some way. Then the activities and athletics subcommittee, you'll notice, has the same dates. They kind of picked up starting at meeting 5 with the main core planning group and finished their work on the same day. And those were from 1 to 3. So those were all on the same day. Here we are today at May 12, update to school board. Do not have dates picked out yet, but we think our next update to you all will probably be in October. And then likely before we go out to bid. Overall project trajectory has us going out to bid in February of next year. Then we're now in that user group phase, which we expect to be in for a couple of months. I can't read every name on here because I know you all do have a full agenda tonight, but wanted to thank each person who participated in the core planning group process. So we've got all the names here and their primary role listed of kind of what viewpoint they represented while they were on the group. So you can see we've got a nice collection of staff across departments. We had several students, we had several parents, community member, community partners, as well as some board members, first responders. So they put in a ton of effort between the commitment of time and just the responsibility of making recommendations. So we are very thankful to them. I mentioned we went on some tours. There was a kind of a 2-track tour experience offered for core planning group members. So in one day, a large group of people went to 4 schools, and that was Owatonna High School, Waseca Junior High School, St. Peter High School, and Tartan High School, which is in Oakdale. And so that was about an hour tour at each of those 4 schools. And then a smaller group of us, which is actually what I went on, which had a little more driving time, went to Mora High School and Rockridge, which is in the Virginia Evelyn Gilbert, aka Rockridge School District. And so they spent the following meeting doing a lot of tour likes and dislikes. And I would say that there was not one school that had every feature everybody liked. And there was not a school that went on a tour that we didn't learn something from, right? So I think it was a valuable experience for people to get to go see and talk to those of what would you do different or what do you love and you'd do again. So that was a big time investment, arranging transportation and things, but I think they really valued it. Then the activities and athletics subcommittee, I've got all of those representatives listed here. So this is obviously a little bit more honed in of a group, but they represent very important stakeholders, right? So we've got parents, we had booster club representatives, we had coaches, physical education and health teachers, community representatives. And so they went on a similar experience on the 22nd of January. So they went to 4 activity centers or expanded gym field house is what many districts call it. So they got to go to New Prague, Mound West Tonka, Mounds View, and then the Wildcat Community Center in Chisago Lakes, and had similar takeaways, right? Saw things they liked and didn't like at each, influential on layout and design, spent a lot of time talking about community interactions. That was a big part of their tour experience was to what extent do any of these other facilities allow the community to use the facility, and how does that influence layout? As well as even just saying, gosh, I love the floor at this one, or gosh, I really don't like the floor at this one, right? Some of those very tangible. I've mentioned a couple times now these guiding principles and design criteria. So that's a written list of statements. I did include them at the end of the presentation. And the guiding principle, I'll click forward and come back, is meant to be a big picture or more subjective topic, right? Around how you want people to feel in the space or overarching goals. Whereas the design criteria is really more about a functional adjacency. This should be next to that, or this should be on the same level as that. And it's a little bit more of a pass-fail. And so when I think about the development of the guiding principles and design criteria, it wasn't any one activity that developed them, but a series of experiences. So tour likes and dislikes certainly kind of called a lot of things directly into question. Input from the staff, students, and the community was a big part of that. We did share all of that input with the core planning group. And then for several topics, we had guided discussion around for example, how we wanted departments to interact with each other, or they came up with a guiding principle around the idea of having student services separate from the main office. So then we had to talk about what's a student service, right? What do you define as student services? Who are the services you're hoping to be there? And things like that. So there was a lot of discussion, and we revisited them every single meeting. When it comes to the development of the diagram, we put a few different slides in here to kind of explain where we started and then where we're at today, and we're not done. Obviously, we are in design through February of next year, so we have quite some road ahead of us. And you had a community comment earlier today talking about energy. I thought that was a good segue. So some other activities that are kind of just getting underway, or at least more in earnest. We have another technology kickoff meeting tomorrow. So we've been doing some initial visioning for what the technology experience should look like for the project. And then on Wednesday, we actually have a energy efficiency and sustainability focused kickoff meeting on Wednesday the 14th. So we have 2 meetings even yet this week, getting together all the parties. So we've got district representative at both of those, as well as our specialty engineers for different types of things. So there's a lot going on, and I'll end on the user group and where we're at with those. So we started with an adjacency diagram, and we had to spend a lot of time talking to the core planning group that this isn't a floor plan. It's trying to make really more of a mind map of what's important of who's near each other. Now, obviously, it translates eventually to a floor plan, but it's a 2D representation of eventually a 3D experience. And so it evolved from this, hand sketch that we created the first time we made it, to this a little bit more technical diagram. Which showed arrows representing what wanted direct adjacencies versus indirect and how important those relationships were. Then to more, sometimes we get called a blob or a bubble diagram, right? Just very generally who should be located where in the building. And you can see this is really kind of by wing. And then it evolves in detail a little bit. And I'll come back to this one. And then eventually to the state we're at today. And it's actually advanced even in the last half a week, right? So we've been converting it to full floor plan. But the overarching guiding concept that seemed to really resonate with the core planning group was wanting to have this unifying commons experience. And so you can see that in the blue color in the center, for those who maybe aren't as color oriented. I get in trouble for that because I have several colleagues who are colorblind. So the Commons Cafe is in the center of the building. For those who are not as familiar with the building floor plan, or the public who are watching, right to the right of the E in cafe is where the existing main entry today is. Another point of context is that is your existing game gym, and that is your existing auditorium. So if you're kind of looking for landmarks, those things are staying where they are today and being improved in place. And the main modifications to the building in regards to function are where the classroom and office wing will be located and some modifications in the V wing. So really what we have is this organizing element of the commons. And sometimes we joke with the core planning group that we're really trying to create lakefront property, right? Everybody wanted to be feeling connected to each other. And what you have right now is a very hallway-based building, right? Where your discrete elements connected by links and hallways. And this kind of takes that and turns it on its head, that we're very not hallway-based and we have kind of a central organizing commons. We have our academic spaces in the upper northwest and bottom southeast. This is a north up drawing. So you can see once we come in the main entry, which is actually just proposed to be just east of the existing main entry. Right off of that, we've got the main office. So that's the goldenrod color that says OFF, short for office. So that's the administration. And then if you go to the level above that, right above that is student services. So that's an example of that criteria at work of wanting to have adjacency for those adults and professionals who support students, but wanting a distinct difference between attendance, for example, and going to see my counselor. Then in the office and classroom wing, you can see that we've got a series of green squares. So those represent classrooms. And a huge topic that spent a lot of time with the core group around was how we should be organized. So we went on tours of hallway-based buildings. Obviously, you all live in what we call a double-loaded hallway-based building today. We went on tours of buildings that had very large pod or house-based buildings. And then we went on tours of buildings that had very small, like 4 or 5 classroom-based pods. And the core group got to spend a lot of time talking about the pros and cons of each of those models. And really landed on the idea of a model that would be flexible for the future, but work for how you work today, which is departmental. So that really set the building block of how big a department should be. So you can see here we've got on the first floor, we've got science. And then right above them, we have math. And then on the third floor, language arts. That's not to say that that's how it has to be forever. And actually, we had a user group meeting last week that spent a lot of time talking about how most classrooms probably can be quite similar, right? That we don't need to highly customize for future flexibility. Science labs are a little different. And then on the other wing, the wing that shares with the office, we've got on the first floor, we're thinking probably world language and then social studies. Other things you can see in the floor plan, we've started to land where bathrooms are, where staircases are, data closets, elevators. The purple color represents some support services for students with special unique needs. So whether that's a special education resource room or an ML classroom or an ASD oriented classroom, it was important to the core planning group that those things were not concentrated. And in fact, they were very intentionally distributed so as to not have a wing that's only serving those students. So they wanted a lot of integration. Then I'll kind of jump across the commons to explain in the V wing, or what people call the V wing today. I don't know if it'll always be called that. We have the art and tech ed, including ag department, staying there, but with lots of modifications around transparency and more functional systems, replacement of cabinetry, where they wish there was a door, right? We've got a whole list from every department of things that they wish were different. And then we're also showing relocating the culinary lab up there. So that's that darker green space. So there is a small addition there, in addition to the bus entry. If I step into the existing building then, right there, we've got the media center in that, a little hard to see, but in the dark blue. That's generally speaking where the media center is today, but it can take over the hallways surrounding it just because we don't need those hallways to get anywhere anymore. And we also wanted to make that commons connection up to that wing. So I kind of say that the media center had to move to the side a little bit to allow that blue commons to come through. In the core of the building, there's a lot of work to make the kitchen and serving experience for students. Everything from hot and cold food prep to freezer storage to a la carte. It'll be larger than it is today. So we've worked with Stephanie Strami and her department on the arrangement of that. Meeting again next week, even on equipment layout. Then in the existing activities area, we've got improvements going on in the game gym, primarily around systems. As well as some aesthetics, and then large renovation of the locker rooms. That was a big discussion topic in that subcommittee. There is a room that everybody calls health. Is it Health 01 or Health 101? Yeah, it's in the bottom right hand. Health 01, and everybody jokes calling it Health 101. So Health 01 is a space that's used as a classroom, but really designed as a locker room. And so we're talking about where to locate certain classrooms. So actually, this is a good time to talk about every time we publish a plan, it changes a little bit, right? That's the nature of the design process. So at the time that we ended the core planning group, we were talking about showing health classrooms in that space. And we've since gotten feedback that it might make more sense for them to be upstairs, swapped with something that I have called mechanical, right? So that's the nature of where we're at in the design. Then I'll move to the expanded gym. So that is the volume label that has the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 on it. We spent a ton of time, as I indicated, talking about operations and making sure it works for before school, during the school day, after school, and evening and weekend events. And the subcommittee recommendation was to place courts 1, 2, and 3 inside the same volume, and then put court 4 in an adjacent and connected but discrete volume, right? So that you could have the community come and go from, for example, court 4, even during the school day. But that before and after school, you could use it for activities and teams and events. And then if you go to the upper level, you can see we've got a elevated walking track around courts 1, 2, and 3, as well as court 4. So you kind of have a 3-track or 3-court loop as well as a 4-court loop. So very, very connected, but having some security options and frankly, acoustic options, right? And then maybe last but not least on this level, I'll talk about the music edition. So the music department is proposed to move from the second floor to the first floor and be on the same level as the stage to help make getting equipment on and off the stage easier, help getting equipment outdoors easier, and into the game gym because they obviously have several performance venues. And so there's 3 large volumes in there. Just met with that group last week and understood their priorities around storage versus office versus arrangement of practice rooms and things like that. And then maybe I'll end on in the existing second floor, so the middle drawing, you can see a couple of abbreviations there. So you see game gym below and balcony. The W on the right-hand side represents wrestling. The group did discuss other potential locations for wrestling, but ultimately landed on some improvements in the existing space. And then on the left-hand side, you see some volumes labeled OS, M, and C. OS represents the opportunity space, which is like a black box type, larger gathering environment, with retractable bleachers, for hosting those events that maybe don't need a full auditorium, but need more than a classroom. And then C represents the community room. And then I already mentioned that the M is mechanical, and that's the swap with health that actually the group has been talking about since we met. So things are, I would say, still fluid in that we learn more every day about people's priorities. And, people do wake up in the morning and come up with new ideas and share them with us. But we're getting more and more level of detail. And so I wanted to say that before we move into these next level of detail drawings. As we are very midstream with the user group process, we met once last week with all space users between Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then we have a couple of special meetings this week, and then we pick up again next week on Tuesday and Thursday, and then again on the 29th, I think it is. So we are moving a little faster than I would say we normally do with that user group process, but we're trying to be respectful of getting staff input before the end of the school year. So we're kind of really working really hard to get all this input so that we can make good progress engineering-wise over the summer. Before I go to the site plan, does anyone have any questions or comments around building arrangement or how we got to this place with our probably close to 100 people between the groups?
Amy?
I have to first say, this is so exciting to see
Yes.
this actually coming together. I was part of the core planning group, but I'm just wondering how we ended up dropping one of the third floors. What was
Sure.
how did that work out?
Yeah, so what Amy is referencing is that I would say the referendum diagram and probably the first drawing we ever showed, maybe go back to it, that's actually one of the benefits of showing these progress diagrams, showed the classroom and office edition, which is on the east side, I would say being two completely equal legs, right, of kind of a pure three-story building, from the ground all the way up. And what you can see actually is a couple of pods labeled with like slash, like world language slash this, and as we started to understand the core group's priorities around adjacencies a little bit better, we learned that the kind of the key building block is to have 8 classrooms together so that a department could actually function together. Another thing, if you don't mind, I might jump forward for a second. This is a proposed massing. Now, this is not materiality. We're not proposing these colors or things, but for those who floor plans aren't their kind of their vehicle for perceiving space, this is we've started to build a 3D model of the existing building, so that is what is in the gray. And then anything colorful is shown as addition, just to help you interpret this. And so this is kind of a bird's eye view looking at all of that. And as we look at the massing of the existing building, we also wanted to make sure that it felt approachable as a person walking up to the building, knowing that on the left-hand side of you, as you walk up, there'd be a 3-story sheer face and then a 1-story building right next to you. And so I would say between the functional programmatic requirements and that really just wanting to make it a nice approachable entry, it was kind of a marriage of the two. And I think this drawing probably best represents, it is almost entirely all 3-story, right? There's a section at the end of the northern wing that does not have a 3rd story on it, but I would say in large part the commons and then the classroom and office wing is. Yes, of course.
Question or comment?
If not, I can keep going. We can always come back. So the site plan is also a document that's somewhat in its infancy. We have worked with our civil engineers in the district and the core group to understand desired operations. We have also had 3 meetings with the city of Northfield thus far, right? So as a developer in their community, we have to follow their ordinances and required setbacks, and they have ordinances from everything from how you arrange parking lots and do landscaping to building height and required bike parking, things like that. So as we have those meetings, we've developed this concept. So what this drawing is showing is the existing building that's not proposed to be demolished in that darkest gray color. Then just for a little context, kind of ghosted in white to the north of that are the existing wings of the building proposed to go away, right? So that's the better part of the M wing and then all of the D, S, and H wings. And then the white are our proposed addition locations. So on the east or right-hand side, that's that office and classroom wing. Then on the north, we've got a small but important fax lab and bus entry entrance. And then on the bottom left or southwest, we've got the music and expanded gym and some associated spaces. So functionally, this design is showing having, I'm going to call it most users approach the site from Division. So you can see that they would come in off Division and be guided into a large queue drop-off loop, which is surrounding student and visitor parking. There would also be student and visitor parking where the lot just south of the funeral home is today. Trying to get people to the front door, right? Because that's what we know parents or family members want to do when they're dropping off a student or picking up a student. Then we are showing just to the southeast of the new classroom and office addition, a small curb cut for our special education buses and vans. So there are some classrooms that those students are going to be primarily served by near there. So to try to minimize their transportation from vehicle to classroom, there's an area for them there. We've got more parking near Memorial Field and the activity entry on the southwest part of the site. And then it's a little subtle on here, but really the intent would be along the west side of the site, really to be staff and deliveries and buses only, right? Another way of saying that is you wouldn't invite parents to come to the west side of the site and go to the north. So probably with signage is how we would accomplish that. So there's some parking. Obviously, that's how you get to the existing loading dock and tech ed area, which is important. But the big change would be to have a bus loop on the north side of the building to try to create a lot of separation between types of vehicular traffic. Another layer that's just starting to show up on this, you can see the lighter gray color represents critical path adjacencies. Not every sidewalk we're going to have, but we've learned that there's a strong desirability from both district and city side to have pedestrian and bicycle path connections. So we're starting to think about, how and where do we get those people across vehicle paths safely, and where are those crosswalks, and is it better here or there? And so we're still very much in progress with that. And actually, we are mid-progress on a traffic study. So that will help do some engineered simulation modeling of how cars would behave in this design and if there's any modifications. I already mentioned some of these, but I came to this, but so this is looking from the northeast to the southwest. Again, that right by main entry, that's the existing main office. And then this next drawing kind of goes to the other view. So here we're looking from the south to the north, so that classroom and office wing addition is off to your right now, and you can better see the expanded gym and music. And one of the intents of this drawing is to demonstrate intended volume, right? So a takeaway would be that the intended experience for that, once you go in that activity entry, would be to be in a larger volume space, kind of between the game gym and the expanded gym. I'll probably go over them quickly. I already made my joke about every drawing we show is slightly out of date by the time I have to publish it, but nowhere is more true than in these. So what we last showed the core planning group was these kind of zoomed in plans of each area of the building. And there's no major changes, but there's lots of discussion about, well, I wish the door wasn't there, it was here. Or I wish the teaching wall wasn't on that wall, I wish it was on this wall. Or actually, I'd prefer the cabinets in this corner for this reason, right? And so that's the kind of input we're getting from teachers right now. But if it helps people zoom in a little bit more in this existing V-wing, which will be more of your kind of your hands-on learning spaces around food and animals and vehicles and art. You can see the existing art department on the west there. We are proposing to relocate their computer lab, which is kind of in the middle of the hallway right now to the north, along with some gallery space. That's kind of what those little red blobs are, and some storage. Then there's a lot of inner working changes between like the wood shop, the metal shop, the ag, robotics, the design computer lab, a lot of desire for better function and flow. But I would say in large part, the main things kind of staying where they are today, right? But with a lot of changes internally, better circuiting, better ventilation, better lighting, maybe some equipment layout changes. We have another meeting with them next week. And then that culinary, so part of the FACS department being located here with that culinary lab classroom. And then they have some functions around laundry and storage. If we go to kind of the center north part of the plan, I already mentioned the media center is in large part staying where it is today. I know many of you have been to that space. And so to give you some context, the kind of the large meeting part of the media center is right underneath the word Media Commons. And all those little gray dots actually represent the walls of the media center today. They're the outer perimeter of it. So we're letting them kind of take over the hallway around it, adding some function for some small group rooms and media production. The 2 computer labs that are there today are getting relocated. And so we just met with that group last week as well. Then in the existing main office, we've got a couple of departments being relocated there, tech and torch, and maybe space for Fernbrook. Here's that kitchen and servery. So as I mentioned, it is getting larger to better accommodate demand and need and have the appropriate storage. For a little bit of context, the existing south wall of the office, that's where the kitchen ends now today, right? So it's getting approximately 40% bigger between all of its various storage and prep and serving spaces. And then we've talked about some of the details here, but we've even started with the core group and user group starting to talk about how many hoops per court and striping on those courts and materiality on every single court in the walking track and locker counts by sport. And so that's what all of the detail that we're kind of in the evolution of populating right now is. And last but not least, the band department. Here's a little bit closer look at just zooming in on the office and classroom wing. So you again can see we've got 2 departments located on the first floor along with some of your setting 3 special education, actually a change that a group last week made. was to move the mild moderate room for second floor to first and put ASD, autism spectrum disorder, on second. So we're still making some minor swaps like that, but all of the core planning groups philosophies around distribution of those types of rooms is being upheld. So the user group process, I've mentioned a lot. What we do is we show up with a drawing that looks like this at every meeting. This is an example of a tech ed shop. When we start drawing, every piece of equipment, what power does it need? What's the safety requirement? Where are outlets? Where are the light switches? We don't pick furniture in these meetings that we're in quite yet, but we often show furniture for scale, right? How many students might use this space at once, and where might the teacher set up shop? And we really try to get all of that input from each different department. We went through round one last week on the 6th, 8th, and 9th. And then we were doing some emailing about dates, but the round 2 will be the 20th, 22nd, and 29th. And then we are certainly available over the summer, but there were some key stakeholders we're trying to prioritize. And then we can always revisit things again with staff in the fall when they come back. Things that don't show up as much in those core planning group diagrams, but are certainly a focus of our team. And we have a lot of team members on the project. So in addition to architects, we have interior designers, structural engineers, mechanical, electrical. We have technology designers. We have a theatrical consultant. We have an acoustician, right? We have civil and landscape and stormwater. So all of those people don't interact as much with the staff. That's what Alex and myself do a lot. But there's other parts of the project. So we're talking a lot about security, having a meeting at the end of the month around lockdown zones and the reduction in exterior doors, which we know is a goal and the diagram is achieving, but we still have to start to think through day to day of where are people going to want to prop doors and can we have a better option for them. I mentioned earlier in my presentation, energy efficiency obviously was one of your key referendum messages, both with upgrades of existing systems and the inclusion of the geothermal. And so we have ongoing activities for that, including a kickoff meeting on Wednesday, where EUI and EUI target will be discussed. We have replacement of some systems, lighting, ceiling tiles. You have some existing uninsulated walls that need to be repaired or insulated, really. We've got some single pane windows, right? So some of those things. And then the diagram really didn't probably do justice to the major renovation of the locker rooms, but those have both condition accessibility and Title IX challenges. So those have a major reimagining. And then just met on Thursday about the auditorium upgrades with Liam and several others. And then furniture really comes as a second phase. It's hard to furnish a space until you know what the space is. That was another referendum inclusion item. So when it comes to next steps and kind of the phase we're in right now, we've transitioned to what we call design development. That's through September. So user groups are a big part of that. We are intending to submit to the city of Northfield at the end of that process to allow their review periods. They told us to allow up to 120 days for review, so we need to make sure to get in line there. A lot of exciting development around 3D renderings and materiality, right? You'll start to see our proposals around how the building will really look and feel. And then coming back to you all at the end of that phase, date to be determined. And then we move into the construction documents. It was referenced earlier in the meeting that the project will be competitively bid. So Knutson Construction will be the construction manager on the project, and they will break the project into what are called work scopes. I would imagine that there might be 35 to 40 work scopes on a project of this scale. Example would be exterior concrete versus interior concrete. Steel supply versus steel erection, HVAC, plumbing, right? Each one of those would be bid out and will receive multiple bids. And so we need to kind of transition from an input phase to, highly technical drawings. And the scope and scale of the project would require that to be months. So you'll see that that's from that end of design development through February. We do not have a bid date picked out yet, but I would also imagine that we might have a longer than usual bid period, just given the scale of the project. And that's also when a few other activities around getting permitting happen. So we have to submit to the state for both code compliance review and plumbing review. And then, like I said, we'd come back to you all probably right before we go out for bid. And then right after bid, we would come to you all and make a recommendation of which contracts to award. We've had early conversations around phasing. That's some people's first question when we start talking about this project is kind of how is it going to get done and when. So we understand in large part that, of course, we can't tear anything down before it gets reconstructed. So that's pretty obvious. But there's a lot of nuance beyond that, including some work that has to happen when the building is unoccupied in the summers or lightly occupied. So we're still with Knutson showing, I'll call it a 36-month time frame here. But pretty soon here, I think they'll have a working phasing recommendation that might tighten that up. And certainly parts of the building would be done before end of 2029 summer. And with that, I'd love to take any questions and continue to emphasize we've had a ton of input from your community thus far, and we're only part of the way there. So
You sound very thoroughly updated. I'm so glad that your process includes so many of our stakeholders. Board members, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, Corey?
Hi, Sal. Thanks for being here.
Great.
Just one
Thanks.
quick follow-up question on the construction phasing.
Sure.
I know there's still a lot of details to figure it out and it's a long-range plan, but likely that the new build would be constructed before any remodeling is done, correct? I'm assuming most people joining the conversation right now are most curious about when do we see the new stuff versus the
Yeah.
old stuff.
Yeah, if I get to the site plan, so it's pretty obvious that we can't tear down the DHS and M wings until the new classroom and office wing is online. Less clear is the expanded gym and music, right? So those maybe aren't as critical because one is a space that doesn't exist today, and another has a home that's not getting demolished, right? So are those in the same phase or staggered? And I think Knutson's working through a couple of scenarios. One scenario might be with a mindset of get everything done as fast as possible, which might have positive effects for bidding, right? For inflation and things like that. It might mean the most disruption to the site, right? And so that criteria has to be weighed against speed. I think you're right in large part that renovation can't really happen. A space can't be given a new job until we have a replacement. But I would imagine that it'll be pretty complicated. And the utilities are not uncomplicated of how the building is fed and what's going to get disrupted and yeah. Yep.
Amy?
So I have a handful of questions. So if you want me to
Yeah,
stop at some
I'm gonna
point
do a
and
couple
come
now,
back.
See if anybody else.
Okay. So if you could go back to your design, that one's a good
This one? Okay.
Yes. So first of all, we had talked at one point at possibly having an enclosed courtyard there off the wing that comes out that goes southeast. And I'm wondering if that's still in the works. Maybe not enclosing the whole thing, but enough so the students could go out and eat lunch outside.
So an enclosed courtyard is a building. So what I would say is if you want to enclose the courtyard, we would have to probably reduce the amount of interior space to fund it. My opinion is when people want to go outside, they actually are seeking to be outside, right? So you'll have a much larger commons and I wish I could.
Why,
If I
by
gesture, can
enclosed,
you
they
see?
just
Yeah.
meant gated, I guess.
Oh, sorry, that's a great definition. I was thinking you were thinking roof and walls and lights.
No.
Oh, sure. So I actually think a wonderful place for that, I'm glad you clarified that, would be right here. Can you see that yeah. So just to the south of the blue of the commons, maybe for those who are not looking at the monitor I'm looking at, kind of between the game gym, the commons, and the science wing, it looks deceptively small, but we're looking at a very large building, all levels on the same slide. That's a large area, right? So for context, your existing cafeteria is right here, right? So I think that would be a lovely space because it'll have a strong sense of enclosure with building on three sides, and it could easily be, oh, I lost my mouse, gated in some way right here to create that sense of enclosure.
That's
Yes.
exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
So then
Thank you
we're
for
on the same
clarifying.
page.
Yep.
And I just wanted to keep that in the mix as you're
Sure.
going through it and talking to about security and various things. So I know that's going to be the biggest question for that area is how we can keep it secure during the day, but still have a lovely place for students to eat in nice weather. So
Wonderful.
Then I had a question about expandability. That was one of the guidelines we had talked about,
Sure.
creating something that was allowed for expandability. So what's your thinking on that?
Sure. So we've been designing and planning the two classroom legs of the wing, imagining, how many more classrooms could you go on the end. So that's been intentional as we discuss it. When we talk about expandability, the line always becomes, do you want to upsize things today for it? Should we plan a bigger electricity service? Should you pay for more boiler capacity today? Should you stub out pipes to it? So I would say if it's just a simple exercise of setting aside space on site, relatively simple concept, right? It's a matter of, do you think it's coming to the point that we should invest funds in it today, right? And so that'll be a topic we'll have to have with, the project oversight committee of, is it really just having a logical place to do it, or is it like shovel ready, right? So the nuance is there in the details, but we have spent some time talking about that. I don't know if there's any other, we haven't spent a ton of time talking about adding any more gyms, but it's pretty obvious to me where they would go. It might disrupt parking and road though. And as you become, we're pushing against this right now, I'll say with the design. If you were to become a bigger building than you are today, you have to get bigger in every way, right? So more buses, more people who want to show up and park, more people who want to play sports. And so the next thing you start eyeing is green space, right? Which has been a strong value of trying to preserve and not change and lose. But I would say that would be something you'd have to discuss.
All right, Ben?
Thanks. Just to ask that question in terms of what's the capacity based on this design?
We're planning around 1,500 right now. You obviously have a current unique flex situation, so dining is a little bit different. Dining and food capacity, we're trying to plan around your current flex experience, which is that everybody, if they wanted to, could show up and try to eat at the same time. But when it comes to like classrooms and things like that, 1,500. And I believe you're at right around 1,250 today, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Can you
Yes.
give an example of, the beginning of the day and the end of the day with the combination of people dropping off and as far as student parking and all that? I mean, how all of that, you see that working for
Sure.
buses, cars, kids coming in the beginning of the day and the end of the day? So
Sure.
just in your map.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I know to be the goal right now, and then I would actually say the traffic study might inform something. So a little too. You want to talk about that? Okay. It is our understanding that there is a lot of momentum and planning around the idea of there being a roundabout on Division right here, right? Not our project, not our timeline, tied to the turnover of that road back to the city of Northfield. And that is also how funding would come unlocked. So we talk about that quite a bit with the city of Northfield. And we're really trying to imagine the site design. What if that was done for the day that your project was done? And what if it came later? And we don't get to control that, certainly. So you'll see that the orientation here shows current orientation, right? So in and out off Division. And so I'll kind of maybe take each vehicle type, Jeff, and we can talk through it. So let's take dad dropping student off for school. They would come in from whatever direction they're coming in, go up into this drop-off lane, which is, as you can see, it's 2 lanes in one direction, which allows for additional queuing. Get everyone to the front door, and then we'd likely collapse down to 1 lane, which I think we're showing right here, might happen somewhere, a merge point so that people can plan to exit and leave the way they came, right? That's kind of the intended flow right now. That would also be the intended flow for, a student would come in off of there. And I don't know if the intent will be to assign parking lots or things like that, but we're really just trying to show a large mass of parking to the northeast of the site to not lose parking from what there is today. Whereas a bus would take a quite different journey. So the intent right now is that a bus would come up Raider Drive. There's kind of an interesting, it's like at the turn of the road actually is where your curb cut is, and go north, and then they would angle park with their door along a curb here, which is kind of best practice so that a bus never has to back up or people don't have to walk between buses. Usually in the morning they show up, I call it onesie twosie. They don't magically all show up at the exact same time. In the afternoon, they're usually all there almost at the same time waiting for students to load. And then at the time they leave, the first bus pulls away. And that's what this kind of bulbous part is about. So without having to back up, a bus can turn around and they, in a big, nice line kind of leave the way they came. And so that really allows cars in large part to be separated from buses. Now, staff, while important, have the benefit of not leaving and arriving typically at the exact same times, right? So that peak moment of 10, 15 minutes of tons of parent traffic or buses all leaving, usually staff arrive slightly before and then staff leaves slightly after. So while we have to think about them, they don't add to as a traffic engineer would think about it, they don't add to the peak moment. And then we do have to think about first responders as well. We need to make sure that in particular, a fire truck can get to all corners of the building. And then once they get there, turn around. So that'll be an ongoing discussion as well. But does that answer your question, Jeff? Okay.
Thank you.
More to come, certainly. The traffic study counts are being done this month. And we won't have a report back until June, probably.
Amy, do you have a couple more?
So, I was wondering about storage for gyms.
Oh, sure.
How did that get decided?
Okay, let me get to, I think this is going to be the best drawing to talk about it. And it actually, I'll gesture on this drawing. So when we talk about storage for the gyms, I would say there's a couple of different kinds of storage. So there's things that are currently stored in the locker rooms that don't need to be stored in the locker rooms. That's just the space you have. So we kind of made that as a category. And then there's things that are accessed off of certain spaces that really want to be. So like an example of the room where the basketballs and volleyballs are accessed off the game gym. That still wants to be there. And then there are also things used by other users, right? So community or things like that. And so as the athletics and activities subcommittee went on tours, they got to see a few different examples of storage. And I think what resonated with them quite a bit, and maybe I'll say, and all of that is balanced against other desires, right? Namely seating capacity. And so as we asked questions around what's the philosophy for the expanded gym, is it storage at all costs? Or is it you want to be able to have 500 people watching each court, right? Just because they all take the same amount of space. I think they landed in a measured approach. And so they really liked on tours, I think all of them had it in some way, but some had it better than others, using the space under the elevated walking track to have, a series of long linear storage rooms. And so that with, I'll call it a modest amount of seating per court was kind of their recommendation. And we still need to work with John Mahal a little bit about, assignments for rooms of like how they might divvy it all up. And we have another meeting, I think it's on Tuesday, the 20th, with that group. So I would say, it's a balance of where should it be stored? Is it accessed daily versus seasonally versus once a year? Who needs to access it? And how can we make it most convenient?
How many lanes in the walking track?
So we're currently planning for 3 lanes in the walking track with some extra, I'm going to call it extra space to step off and tie your shoes if you need to, which is an example on one of the tours that they really seem to like, as opposed to they actually saw some examples of maybe someone who tried to, a district who tried to fit another lane or 2 in, and they felt it came at the expense of safety, right? That the lanes came so close to the wall or so close to the edge. And so they felt that was the right approach, because we can't, somebody might say, why can't you just add more and more to the inside? You start to interfere with the State High School League, basically airspace clearance needed above basketball court. So we're kind of getting as close to those as you can right now. So.
Okay.
Want to do one more, Amy?
I have 2 more, but
Okay,
I'll
let's-
do whatever you'll let me do. So I was wondering where we are with the geothermal.
Sure. So we have a proposal approved for a test well of the Darcy system, which we don't know for sure, but we think with high likelihood is going to be the right technology approach for you all. And the site plan actually didn't show it, but we need to allocate space for that. Certainly things can exist on top of it. And so that test well field work will be happening right after school gets out. And that will help us hone in on the number of wells we believe we need. And so to accomplish both heating and cooling, right now I think our engineers are saying somewhere between 12 and 20, which is a wide range, right? It's, and efficiency of that test well will be what actually hones in on it. And then they have to think a little bit about site flow and geology. And we've gotten recommendation that being on the, I'll call it the southeast part of the site is going to be more efficient than being on the northwest part of the site, just because of the flow of water and water table and, things a little bit beyond my personal expertise. So we're probably going to try to keep it, I'm going to call it just to the south of that access road that kind of runs east-west. But the exact number and arrangement, we do not know yet.
Thank you. Can I do
Yeah.
my last? It really is my last. This is just my request and my hope for you as you're going through this design process,
Sure.
is that I would love to see us have some sort of signature design element to our high school, kind of like Owatonna has their clock tower. I don't know what it would be for us, but something that would become sort of a symbol for our school.
Sure. Wonderful. We can work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sal.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, item B tonight is the revised 2024-25 and the proposed 25-26 child nutrition fund budgets. Director of Child Nutrition Stephanie Stormy will present. And the revised budget will be an item for individual action at our next meeting, May 27th. The proposed budget will be an item for individual action at the June 9th meeting. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out, because Sal closed this out, so. Just go ahead, click on that. Great, perfect. Thank you, Tim. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come in here and talk with you this evening about the child nutrition program and what we've done over the past year. And then we will also be discussing the revised budget as well as the proposed budget for next school year. As we think through our department processes, we always try to make sure that we bring into play the school's vision or the district's vision, the benchmarks, and the strategic commitments. We try and do a lot, whether it's working with the community, with some partnerships. As I had mentioned in my narrative to all of you, we worked with St. Olaf students and creating some waste management programs at both the high school and the middle school level, and just trying to work with as many partners as we can in the community. The Child Nutrition Department shares their responsibility and understands that we can really take a huge part in the students' success during the day. We can help to foster their social, their emotional, and their learning environment by providing quality, nutritious meals, which you'll see is kind of the key to our vision, which is provide quality, nutritious meals that support the growth and development of students to fuel their learning. In the next few slides, I will be sharing some photos of students. These are actually taken in our schools, all of the different schools, food that they're actually being served on the lines. And so we will be sharing some of these photos with you and then talking about some of the things that we've been doing throughout the school year. This slide represents breakfast participation over the last 3 years. And as we know, last year, the Minnesota Free School Meals Program came into play. It was passed by Governor Walz the previous year and started last year, and it continued this year. We know that research has shown that starting the day with breakfast can really help to enhance the day for our students. It helps with better academic performance, their concentration, and even their test scores. We have seen a slight increase for this school year, about a 1% increase, which we're happy to see, even though enrollment has declined. You can see kind of in September and October, there's a greater increase from last year to this year, but that also plays into the fact that there were more school days in those months. So when we look at the overall from September to January, we saw that there was that 1% increase for that. And we actually served about 65,000 meals in that period of time. It is the same number of school days that we had last year versus this year. So with breakfast being free last year, we learned some best practices, and that can be another reason why we see that there's maybe not as huge of an increase in our breakfast numbers this year and our participation. We found that, especially at the elementary level, having free breakfast maybe played into students not getting to their classrooms as efficiently as we needed them to, and distracting and taking away from class time. It also put extra burden on the custodial staff when they were eating in their classrooms. So we really brought breakfast back to the cafeteria, and it created a time for the students to be able to visit with each other, and just more guidelines were put into place with that, with a clearer understanding and knowing that free breakfast was going to continue, and just what the numbers were that we were expecting from each year. This next slide shows lunch, and we had about a 2% increase in our lunch participation for this year. Again, this is from September to January. We've served just over 228,000 meals during this time period. Obviously, we've served a lot more over the last, in addition to the last couple of months, but just wanted to compare last year versus this year and where we were at with the increase in lunch participation. And again, we know that this participation probably would have been even greater, or the percentage increase, but with a decrease of enrollment, we know that that plays, it has an impact on that. Also, we had 3 days, we had 2 weather-related days, which we didn't have any participation. And we also had the scheduled e-learning day. So those were 3 days that impacted the amount of meals that we would have served. However, they weren't on during these days. The November one was the scheduled e-learning day. We also, in addition to serving free breakfast and free lunch each day to students when they're in attendance, we do an after-school community snack, and we've served just shy of 13,000 snacks for this school year. And these are provided at all 3 elementary schools, and they're also provided at the middle school. In addition to that, we've done meals in the evening as students at Greenville Park are transitioning from community school into the evening programming. And over the last month, Erin is sitting here, we've been able to, with a grant that Erin was provided, be able to serve hot meals to the students. So it wasn't, in the past, it had been just a cold bag lunch that we gave them, but now we've been able to serve some hot meals for them. And so that's something that will continue through this year, and I'm not sure whether it will continue next year or not. We'll just have to see where the funding is with that. One thing that we introduced this year at the high school was a global trends line. And what we had seen in talking to high school students and kind of sampling some various food options with them is these were some of the items that they really enjoyed or were seeking out. The other reason why we wanted to try doing a global trends line is kind of some planning into, you know, the development of our new kitchen space, and see how many lines do we need to have? You know, where are the interests at with kids? Do they want just a pizza line and a main line, or do we want to try and bring in some other different exciting things for them? With the Global Trends line, you'll see the top picture is of a kielbasa and the fresh vegetables and fruits that they had with that. The bottom one is actually egg roll in a bowl. It was something that we tried. Wasn't a huge hit, but it was something that we tried. It actually tasted really good, but I think, you know, some kids are hesitant. They eat with their eyes, and so it may not be something that they're as excited about trying. One of the big hits was the chicken tikka masala. And so kids, we sampled that last year. They really enjoyed it. So we brought that onto the line. Pupusas, tamales. We've been serving the burrito bowl line is every Friday, and that's a huge hit. And then just some various options, like we're doing a new cherry blossom chicken in addition to the regulars like orange chicken or teriyaki chicken that they're used to having. Swedish meatballs is something else that we've tried. So you'll see on there Minnesota Mondays, and I'm going to share on the next slide a little bit more about that. But on the Global Trends line, what we decided to do was every Monday feature a Minnesota produced item. So these are some of the farms that we worked with over the past school year. One that we worked with, Deeply Rooted Farms. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's actually near Cannon Falls. And this was a vegan, it's a plant-based bean or that the students, and we did a vegetarian, actually a vegan chili for them, and it went really well. Kids who don't normally eat vegetarian foods also really enjoyed the chili, and they were asking about it when it went off the menu. We tried to rotate monthly what we served. So one month we did Ferndale Farms. We did a banh mi sandwich with that, which was just a warm turkey sandwich. And then it had kind of a coleslaw, not a coleslaw, but some vegetables that were served with it, similar to a coleslaw. We've tried a pizza burger, which is from Rancher's Legacy, and that's made with Minnesota beef. And then we also did a hot turkey with the Ferndale Market, and did a lot of produce such as cantaloupe, watermelon, and things like that. That was also shared on the main lines. But we kind of wanted students to know that every Monday on the Global Trends line, that's where they could get kind of a Minnesota produced item. During this school year, we created a document, or we had the child nutrition had our review. And this was something that every 5 years we do with the state of Minnesota. And we're required to do it because we're part of the USDA program. I won't read all of the commendations, but they were very pleased with our review. We had great results, and they were especially proud of how well our staff worked together, you know, the receptiveness that they have to trying new things, and just how they are working together. Along with that review, we also have the wellness policy reviewed. Now, that's something that's a district policy, so it doesn't necessarily just hit child nutrition. It's the overall district, but it does fall under our blanket when we're being reviewed. And they were very pleased with how, and very complimentary, how our district is actually putting into play the wellness policy. It's not just something that has been written because we know we have to have it, and it's just kind of tucked back there for people to access it, but it's something that's being implemented, and they noticed it when they were out in the buildings. They spent 2 days, one full day at the high school reviewing everything, and then they were also at the NCEC and had some discussions with Greenville Park as well. In the next few slides, I'm going to start to discuss the budget. And we know, as I had mentioned, we continue to see high participation. Participation was a little higher than we had anticipated this year. So for the 24-25 school year, the revised budget, we are suggesting to change the revenue to about 2.8 million. We had previously proposed 2.5 million for the budget, but because we're seeing an increase in local sources are considered to be adult meals, a la carte meals, a la carte purchases, caterings, things like that. So we saw an increase there, plus the additional state and federal sources that we have. And then I'll go just for the proposed budget, since it's on this slide. We are recommending a proposed revenue of 2.8 million for next school year. Looking at the expenditures, we know that along with increased participation, which is great, we also have an increase in our food and supplies budget. So we saw quite a significant increase in that. Part of that might be due to inflation. It might be, various things that have fallen under that. We did also Val and I looked at the actual salaries and benefits, and currently we, with the revised budget, are suggesting a 1.4 million change over the 1.3 million with salaries and benefits, because that's more actual and current to what we had spent. And then the purchase services, you'll see from the proposed to the revised budget actually are lower. And this is because Rev Track purchases fall under that. And we know with the free meals, we have far fewer online payments. So there's less charges with that. And the food and supplies, you can see, has increased. Equipment actually went down a little bit, and that's because we did get a grant, a farm to school grant, to be able to purchase an oven at the high school, along with some some revenue that we'll get to spend on the food and supplies through farm to school as well. Next year, you can see the proposed budget is only 13,000 because we really aren't anticipating a lot of equipment purchases. And with the building of the new high school, a lot of things that are kind of working through their time life, if we can't reutilize them in the new kitchen space, we would be looking at purchasing new equipment for that. So total expenditures for the proposed budget were about 2.7 million. And we are suggesting with the revised budget for this school year to be at 3 million. And then the proposed budget for next school year to be at 3.3 million. Again, we know with these expenditures, one thing to mention with the salaries and benefits, that when we have those weather-related days with the new ESST laws in Minnesota, we are required to pay our staff. So we don't have any revenue coming in on those days because we're not serving meals, but we have the expenditures because we are paying the staff on those days. So we know that as we're looking at the budget that I had mentioned, the fund balance max is something that we look at. The state of Minnesota, or the Minnesota Department of Education, over the last several years extended our fund balance exceed amount to 6 months, which is our average operating expenditures. And they were supposed to change it to 3 months, but now I've heard word in the last couple of days, Val, I don't know if you heard word last week, but they're now reconsidering going back to the 6 month for next school year. So that's to be determined of where we're at. These things kind of always fall after we've got all of our plans in place. We know it's kind of fluid and there's lots of changes with that. But so when we're looking at that, if we were to exceed that 4 months, we really try, or the 3 months, we know we're well under those guidelines for our fund balance, for the proposed fund balance for next year of 296,000. Because we really try and stay in alignment with the school district, who also has 14% as their fund balance goal, which would be about 460,000 is where we would want to end our fund balance. So for the proposed budget, we're well below that. And some of the expenditures we know with the budget proposal changes that we will be charged back into the general fund, a different amount that can be calculated through the state of Minnesota. There's a calculation that we can do, and Val is able to determine what that is. So a portion of that will be back, going back into the general fund. And that's kind of to bill for the services of the use of the building, the space that we're using. Is that correct, Val? Kind of, okay. So with that 3 months max, like I said, it would be closer to the 465,000. Again, looking at the proposed budget, kind of taking a step back, we had proposed ending our fund balance at around 817,000 for this year. But now, after looking at where our current expenditures are, our current revenue, we're actually looking at spending that down a little bit more. So we're a little closer to about 781,000 with that revision. So as you can see, kind of over the next couple of years, our fund balance will be considerably lower than it has been. But we know that that always changes as we kind of are evaluating our revenues, expenditures, our participation, actual participation. We won't know usually until June or into the summer what the state will be providing or what the federal government will be providing for our reimbursement rates. So once we know that, we can also make some adjustments. We are looking at also keeping the staff meal rate at about $5, which is what we've had. But if the state and the USDA comes out with a minimum that needs to be increased, then we will adjust that according to what their minimum requirement is. And we are also looking at adjusting due to inflation, the à la carte prices, which is something we really haven't done over the last couple of years. So we're looking at kind of making changes with that, and we'll evaluate that with our food vendor as we see necessary. So with that, I just want to mention how thankful I am for all of my staff. This was a little message that was sent out to the Spring Creek Lunchroom Heroes. Last week was Lunch Hero Day, and it's a giant poster that's hanging in their cafeteria. A lot of the schools recognize the staff for all the hard work that they do. You know, a teacher appreciation, nurse appreciation, all fall within this time. So it's great that all of our heroes in the district are being recognized. And we know that we couldn't do the things that we do each day without them because they're right there helping those kiddos be well fed. So I'd like to take this time if you have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. And very impressive, the food options and the local connections and outstanding commendations. So well done on that.
Thank you.
Members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Ben?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Stephanie. Great job. And thanks to your staff as well. That egg roll in a bowl looks pretty good to me.
We probably have some left in the freezer. You could try it.
When we look at just the budget, looking at, and remind me, I feel like I should know this, but in terms of the state allocation, is that essentially a chargeback for the number of meals that we serve, or is that kind of, how is that amount determined in revenue?
Yep, so they set, so the federal government sets kind of an amount that they reimburse, and then the state is covering the additional costs so that students can all have free meals. So what we do is, as students go through the line, we record each of them as they're having a meal. And then at the end of the month, we pull all of that data together, and I submit what's called a claim into the state of Minnesota. And then they evaluate that and then determine what our reimbursement rate is.
Gotcha. So when we look at that state source for the 25, 26, we're sort of estimating on the number of meals we anticipate serving. Is that kind of how we get that number? 1.385.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, so we assume similar participation. Again, like Stephanie mentioned, we don't actually know the rates, and so we just assume they're staying flat. I'm logging in to look up what the decline is. I feel like it's related to the summer meal service because they talked about switching and making that a lesser reimbursement or a different model. But do you remember off the top of your head why it's declining for next year?
For which?
For the state sources?
The state sources.
Otherwise, I'll look it up here quickly.
Yeah.
And do we feel pretty confident in terms of federal funding at this point? I mean,
What kind of question is that? As confident as we can be. How about that?
Not aware of any significant changes in that particular.
No, the only thing we've heard to date was about the farm to school grant, which ours was actually state funded, and so that was not at risk at this time.
Okay.
And Ben, I will say, oops, I'm sorry. I will say the state source, I do believe the 23-24, there was a portion of there, we were paid at the summer food service rate. Because I think, was that the year that we
You know
were
what it is?
paid?
It's your grant. That's what it is. There's
Oh,
a
supply
grant.
chain assistance funds, that?
No, it's the farm to school grant because you don't have that for next year at this point.
Oh, sure.
So
Okay.
there's an additional grant revenue in 24-25 that we do not have in 25-26. That's what the decline is.
Is that the end of your questions, Ben?
No, but go ahead. Amy.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Corey and then Amy.
Hi, Stephanie. I have two budget questions. The first is concerning the food and supplies increase that we realized this year versus the proposal. Not surprised based on what we've seen in the market. I'm curious how a system our size has navigated some of the tariff impact, because obviously with perishable foods, anything that's been enacted probably impacts your food cost more quickly. I'm guessing that's why there's a 25% increase over what was budgeted. I see one picture with two large boxes of bananas. I'm guessing those were more expensive than we thought because maybe they came from somewhere that wasn't in the US. I'm assuming a lot of our products do. So just curious to hear about how that impacted your plan this year, and then also obviously see an increase for next year budget as well with some uncertainty.
Sure. Yep. I would say one of the biggest reasons that we have the increase in our expenditures for food and supplies is because of the increased participation that we have. So we'll see that. As far as we call it Buy American in our world, that's kind of the terminology that they've been using. Next year, we have a 10% amount. So 90% of our goods have to come from America. 10% can be outside of that. We have things like bananas that are on an exception list, mandarin oranges, canned pineapple, because we know these are products that the students really enjoy, and they're consumed in large amounts. And if we have those, we're going to quickly go over our 10%, and then we have to include a waiver for that to go over it. And then we're going to see that number go down to 8% in the next 2 school years, and then 5%. So this is something that we've had in place since last year, for about a year that we've had the Buy American. We have to track it. So if we have goods that come in and we see that maybe something is coming from Indonesia, we have to document it on a form saying, where the source is, why we had it. Are we purchasing it because it's a lower price than something that we can find domestically, because it would have a huge impact on our budget. So there's things like the canned fruits. Some of them we can get that are non-domestic, but we might be saving $20,000 just because we were able to get them outside of the US. Don't quote me on those numbers. I mean, that's just something, that we've evaluated in the past. And so our staff, I know we're looking at, as we're planning for next school year, what are the items? Our distributor works with us. There's a symbol that says, Buy American, buy it, or that it's American made, and it meets those qualifications so that we know it's something we can purchase within these guidelines. That's one of the reasons why we did have that additional, our expenditures are so much higher for next year, because we actually went with a 7% increase on our expenditures, whereas in the past, we were probably closer to that 5 to 6%. So we wanted to give ourselves a little bit more of a buffer with that. Did that answer your question?
It did.
I don't know. Okay.
It did bring up other questions. Is that
Okay.
Buy American mandate, state or federal mandate?
Federal.
Okay,
Mhm.
which makes sense.
Yep.
And then this might be more of a Val question. Looking at the proposed budget for next year for the ending fund balance, it's about 60% less than what we have this year. And I understand the different math that comes in after the fact, what comes in. Is there any concern though about, looking at the raw number going down by, $400,000 or $500,000, excuse me, Because if we did that again next year, that would put us in a deficit.
Of course, there's concern. I would say historically, when we've looked at this budget, like even if you just look at proposed to revised, because we don't have any idea what the revenue reimbursement rate's going to be, there's likely going to be a positive impact there. We do have some flexibility with the chargeback, but again, there's ramifications to both funds depending on which way we handle that. I also think as we know more with the tariffs, we can respond more to the products that we're choosing. We have some amazing options for students, and that might have to be scaled back in the future, unfortunately. But we don't want to react prematurely and be doing that. So, and again, it's a max fund balance, right? So while the goal would be to have 14%, just for that flexibility, this is a relatively stable fund without massive changes, unless there's some really dramatic changes to participation that we couldn't have projected. But for the most part, that's pretty scalable. So yes, we'll certainly keep watching it, but we're hoping the reimbursement rate will be an appropriate increase, and that we can switch this in the revised budget to make it look not quite as terrible.
Stephanie, you had mentioned the a la carte prices potentially increasing. I'm guessing that's not reflected in this then.
We did do, we have the a la carte reflected, but not the adult meal, right?
Correct. We kept that at
Yeah.
$5. Yeah, until we could find out, what they're saying the minimum price is.
Thank you.
Amy, you had a question?
Thank you, Stephanie, for your report. Your report always makes me hungry. So my question is about if we lost the farm to school grant, will that affect your Minnesota Monday menu?
We're hoping that we still actually have some funds, smaller amount that will carry over to next year. But we're hoping that we can still implement that because actually some of that stuff is quite cost effective. When it comes in the rare form, then you have more labor that goes into it. So you kind of, it's a catch-22. It's either less labor to do it or more, but it's something that they like. And I think it's definitely worth it. We hope not to get rid of that. I think we'll look at other avenues that we can maybe cut costs. The managers are always looking. Just today we had a managers meeting and they were all coming with ideas that, maybe we can do this instead of, doing this differently. We're not going to sacrifice on the product they're getting, but maybe it's the quantity that they're getting. One example is guacamole. The students love guacamole. Well, when we have that out in a pan, they're heaping it themselves. But if we can self-portion the guacamole, they might still get that option, but they're just not going to have as much. And then it also goes further. It helps other children at the end of the line who maybe want guacamole and weren't able to get it at the beginning. So, that's just one example, but they're really always trying to think of ideas and ways that they can be creative with things. Bananas, we know, are very sensitive fruits that, they might come in one day and they're not ready to use, and then you have to wait the weekend. Well, then they've got the brown spots and kids aren't going to eat them. So they'll still utilize them. How can they do that? Make them into a banana muffin, homemade muffin or something like that. So they're really trying to limit the waste that they have with items.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Question, comment? Okay, Jenny?
Thanks, Claudia. My question is regarding the free breakfast for all students. Are the students who ride the bus, do they arrive on time to fully take advantage of the free breakfast program?
They should be able to. We have the option that there are bags. So if students, if for some reason a bus is late or there's a situation that happens, that there are those circumstances where they can get a bag and then take it back to their classroom. And then they would have the opportunity to eat it. We're just not having it where a lot of the meals, many students who got there in time and had plenty of time to eat weren't participating in breakfast. Instead, then they were grabbing the bag and taking it back to the classroom. So we really wanted to encourage the use of students eating in the cafeteria. But students who come off the bus have that option of coming through and getting a bag.
And that's in all buildings at all grade levels that where you have that option?
It should be. Yep.
Okay, because I know
Yeah.
some of the students, so if their bus arrives late, which some, depending on how far away they are, do arrive late and they're late to their classroom,
Yep.
they would still have time, so then they would be more late to their first hour class because they would have to go and grab the bag.
Yep, if they want the breakfast, then they would just come down and get it. Sometimes at the elementary level, I think they go to the office. If a student goes to their classroom and checks in their classroom, but they want a breakfast, then somebody will come down with them and grab the breakfast for them. I've been at the schools when that's happened too.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else, question or comment? Okay, Ben?
Sorry. How many meals did you say for was total? It was like 250,000.
For lunch, like 290,000, 228,000 through January. Yep.
That's impressive amount of meal when you get to community. And that's great that we're able to source, especially locally. There's some great options on that. I just had a food safety related question. Do we cook any protein from raw, like ground beef or?
So at the elementary levels and middle school, we would not. At the high school, we do, and it's the raw beef patties that we do, and then the turkey that we bring in from Ferndale Farms. We have done that at the middle school, so I should take a step back. The middle school has done that. In the past, we had done that at the elementary schools as well, but with the increase in participation, it's just too hard for them to cook that many because their numbers are really high at the elementary levels, and to cook that much raw turkey and to be able to pull it apart or to slice it and get it prepared for those meals just wasn't efficient. And so they haven't been doing that at the elementary schools.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And does the MDH, they get in once a year, don't they?
They come twice a year.
Or is it twice?
Yep, it's required that they come twice a year. And then they also visit our summer programming. So we usually get 3 visits a year from them. And then all of our staff are required to be trained in ServSafe and have their certified food protection manager certificate too.
Thanks.
Great. Dunno, anyone else? No? Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next we have the revised 2024-25 and proposed 25-26 Community Education Fund budget. We'll have the revised budget as an item for action at our next meeting and the proposed budget at the June 9th meeting. Great, welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to share the preliminary budget for the Community Education Department. As we get started, I'll just remind you of the principles of community education: lifelong learning, maximizing community and school resources, maximizing community and school facilities, promoting collaboration and partnerships, and citizen involvement. And to that end, last fiscal year, we did have 11,483 participants in a community education program. We did schedule 1,116,652 hours of community or facility usage by outside community members. So outside of what happens in the K-12 school day through community ed. And we do have approximately 600 employees in the community education department. This ranges from everywhere from a flag football coach that might work 4 hours in a month for a program all the way to our full-time staff and licensed teachers. And that is the cover of the summer community education brochure. So we hope you all receive that at your house in early April. These are the programs that make up the some of the community education department. I'm not going to give highlights for all of them, but I'm going to share a couple of highlights right now. So in our adult basic education program that is held at the Northfield Community Education Center, we did this year, they count for purposes of attendance to submit to the state. We just wrapped up our attendance count for this current year, and we are 26% increase over last year. Last year, we also had about a 26% increase. So continuing to see a great increase in attendance at adult basic education, which is really great. We are also in the process, we did add back GED this year, a GED class. And so due to the popularity of that class, we are in the process of adding a GED testing center at the NCEC. That's kind of a natural progression once you start having a relatively good sized class of GED students, because ultimately the goal is you want them to test and complete their GED. So we are also in the process of that. And then, as you all know, we did receive the Multipurpose Community Facility Projects Grant. And so that was about a $500,000 grant to renovate the adult basic education space primarily. It also touches a few other places in the building, but that was one spot we did not renovate in the initial renovations of the former Greenbelt Park Elementary. So really exciting to do some renovations in that space. Recreation and enrichment program continue to see participation that was higher than what we had pre-pandemic. So those programs continue to have really great participation numbers. As I mentioned, summer registration opened on April 4th, and so that's off to a great start. And then when you look at the programs under our community programs and partnerships, a number of them, that being community schools, the Healthy Community Initiative, and the Community Action Center, are all part of we were selected as a site visit as part of the National Community School and Family Engagement Conference that's happening in Minneapolis at the end of the month. So we are full. They could take 50 participants, and we had 50 people selected. So they will be busing down people on the morning of Wednesday, May 28th to do some tours at our community school sites and then also at the Northfield Community Education Center. So we're really excited to host them as well. And then, of course, these are the programs that are the early childhood programs, many of them which are housed in the Northfield Community Education Center. And just a few highlights from these programs. Early childhood family education continues to have great registration numbers. We often are very close to full in all of those program areas on the day we open registration. Hand-in-hand preschool, as you also know, was selected for voluntary preschool, kindergarten this year. So we did offer 28 free full-day preschool slots and did fill those. We are in the process of registering for Bridges to Kindergarten right now. That is a 1 week-long program for kids that'll enter kindergarten in the fall at each of our elementary school sites. So continue to have great attendance in all of the early childhood areas as well. As we move into this budget, I just want you to acknowledge, and as you saw in the narrative, the Community Education Advisory Council and the program coordinators do help guide this work. So they were each a part of, the program coordinators were part of building the program budgets and helping guide that. And then as well as the Community Education Advisory Council has seen this presentation and asked that it be shared with all of you. The Community Education Advisory Council does meet 10 times per year. Members on that are appointed to 3-year terms. We do have 2 student representatives. We do have a school board representative. Jenny is the representative to the Community Education Advisory Council. And then we do have a member from the City of Northfield's Park and Recreation Advisory Board as well. So with that, you are looking at the budget revisions for this current year. And that is really has to do with higher revenues in due to participation rates. Now, that does lead also to some higher expenditures, but we are seeing a higher participation rate driving a lot of those changes. While we're on this slide, one thing I should reflect is while it does appear as one ending fund balance, these fund balances aren't allowed to mix. So we reflect it as one ending fund balance, but this is really what they look like, and we can't decide we want to move funds from one balance to the other unless it's been approved by the state, and typically they've only done that at certain times. So just the community education stewardship goal, much like your goal for K-12, we would work towards a overall fund balance that equals 14% of community education's overall expenses, which you can see what that equals. And the goal would be to achieve that with all of the fund, so all four of those fund balances having a positive balance. So there are some budget assumptions that we have to make at this time of year for this upcoming fiscal year. First, of course, a slight increase in revenue for fee-based programs on the activity that we're currently seeing in this year. There's also, and you've heard, those who've been here before have heard me talk about the federal child care stabilization funds. These were the funds that started during COVID to help child care centers stay in business. And so those stabilization funds have shifted to state funded, and the state has changed the allowable uses for those as well. So when those child care stabilization funds started, 70% of the funds were toward payments towards the employees and 30% were towards the organization. And as you'll see on the next slide, all those funds now go towards the employees. So there's no longer any of those child care stabilization funds that are provided to the organization. As I previously mentioned, we do have voluntary pre-K funds. That is what is funding our 28 slots in our full-day preschool. Those are funded much like a K-12 student fund. And so they're coming in the general fund. They're coming in as ADM, and they're at different, it's a little bit of a complicated formula, as Val can attest to, in that there is different things that will weight them differently, such as whether a child might also be receiving special education services, EL services, other things. And so it's a little bit of a hard formula to exactly nail down what those funds will look like, because of it's a little bit different for each student that's in that program. But those funds will come into the general fund, and then they will offset the staff that we do have teaching those voluntary pre-K sections. We are seeing an increase in adults with disabilities revenue per state statute. So that will does about double the revenue we do receive from the state per the state statute for adults with disabilities. And then a slight decrease in pupil-based formulas. Our pupil-based formulas are based on census counts. So when you have declining birth rates, this is also what drives down some of our pupil-based formulas, because in the areas of school readiness, ECFE, those are census counts that drive those formulas. And so, as you all know, those counts are not as high as they have been in other years. So that is what the slight decrease is in those revenue areas. And then for some of the expenditures that we have accommodated for the appropriate increases in salary, wages, and insurance. And I've highlighted there some of the things that are going into place here in the next year as well. We have the appropriate staff support for all children. As you all know, all of the programs at the Northfield Community Education Center are integrated programs. And so we are serving all students and whatever need level they have, and we are making sure we have an appropriate support staff for those children. We are going to have a reduction of a hand-in-hand preschool section this next year. What we have found, well, one with declining enrollment, our afternoon-only preschool sections are not as popular, and people are also migrating more to the full-day section. In the full-day section, if you do have someone who still naps, it is an easier way to accommodate that. So we are going to reduce a Monday through Thursday afternoon preschool section. That we have tracked the attendance data for the last couple of years, and we will be able to accommodate students in other sections at this point with the enrollment, with the essentially the grade level enrollment that we are seeing in the early childhood areas. And then a slight increase in chargeback from the general fund. This was approved as part of the general fund budget reduction process. And so you were all aware of it. It was the same thing Stephanie mentioned earlier as well. So this slide does highlight the areas our proposed revenue comes from. As I mentioned, we do receive levy and state aid. Those that are in the census count in the early childhood areas have gone down, but then we have seen some increases in like our school age care levy and also in our adults with disabilities levy. So there is some balancing out there. The federal aid that you are seeing there are those child care stabilization grants that I was referencing. So you can see where that money had played out in previous audited years that is not in either the revised budget or in the proposed budget. The local sources is primarily fees for programming. So the vast majority of our local sources is fees. Some of the smaller amounts that would also be in there would be payment from the city of Northfield for us to administer the recreation programming, grants that we receive, things like the Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 scholarships, but you're looking at the vast majority of that being for fees for programming. And then as you see in our proposed expenditures, much like the K-12 budget, we are a people-based program. It takes people to run our programs, and so that's where you're seeing the majority of our expenses in the salaries and benefits is just the actual human power we need to operate the department. So then as we get to the proposed budget, you can see where we've already reflected kind of what the revisions were, and then you can see what is proposed for next year. And as you can see, we are showing that the biggest loss would come in the general community education area. And that is specifically tied to early ventures still, which is, I feel, a little bit of a repeat of what I told you last year as well. If you remember, after this budget presentation last year, we did have a work session with the board and kind of focused on early ventures and kind of what were the goals of that program and the next steps. When we did open registration in March for this year, the demand was again extremely high, especially in the infant and toddler. So this year we could have not only filled an infant section plus another class, but we filled the toddlers class section, and we could have filled a second toddler class. So what we know in the Northfield community is that care for infants and toddlers is still hard to find, difficult to get into, because there's just not enough of it. With declining enrollment and the number of other options that become available once you hit either that 2.5 to 3 area, there's less of a demand right now when you're looking at that preschool age. So I'm going to say the 4 to 5 more, but even in that late 3 years. So while we could add a significant amount of spots in the infant and toddler, we are not as full anymore in that preschool age area. And so right now, we are full all the way up to the year before kindergarten next year, where we do have, I believe, 4 slots available right now. Every other class is still sitting with a waiting list. The only struggle with that infant and toddlers, as you know, is where the most cost comes in care as well. The ratios are lower to provide care in that area. And of course, that's where the greatest need is as well. And all of that being said, as you saw in the narrative, we continue to see extremely great outcomes in kindergarten readiness from those cohorts of early ventures. As you remember, back a couple years ago, we had 2 years in a row of 100% of students out of the early ventures cohorts being ready for kindergarten. And we saw this current kindergarten's class had 93%. So it's a situation we still are working on. We're putting together some proposals of ways we can look at this differently. It will have some impact to the program, but we are going to need to make some changes in order to make the budget not continue to decline. And that is the only area that is causing the most concern right now. And so that's where you can see in the general community education line item in the fund balance. So we are proposing in this revised budget of fund balance ending of $574,083, with then the proposal for next year being at $305,401. And then here is just a little bit of a fund balance history, just because I think it is good to reflect on what has happened and where the community ed fund balance has been over what's getting close to the last 2 decades. There is, of course, some variables that we can't predict until we really get into the year. That's, of course, our actual program enrollments, our fee collection, and then, of course, student needs. I'll also just take this time to just reflect on our community school programming and our middle school youth center. That is not, it is overseen by the community education department, but not in the community school or sorry, not in the community education department budget, simply because of what the funding sources are, being grants that either need to be in the general fund or coming with support from the targeted services program. So we do have after school and evening programming at the Greenville Park Community School. We also have after school programming at the Middle School Youth Center, the Bridgewater Community School, and the Spring Creek Community School. Several deliverables, as you can see there, through programming. But more, I just want to share some highlights from this last year. So we have this last year offered dental clinics at all elementary sites twice this year. So children who are uninsured or underinsured can have had 2 cleanings. So essentially we've got them on the schedule. So they're getting a cleaning every 6 months at school. And then if there is any concerns, we do assist with referrals out for any additional services that need to be provided. We've developed a great partnership with St. Olaf College and have offered OLEs for opportunities at our community school sites. This is a partnership with St. Olaf sports teams. And so they're coming in offering they'll offer a couple nights of clinics. Nothing excites elementary kids more than a few college kids, teaching them some sports. And then they actually invited all the students onto the St. Olaf campus for supper one night and to have opportunities to play on their field. So that was really exciting. We also have had makerspace clubs this year. Those kids who have participated in those clubs have ended with a field trip to the Cannon Valley Makerspace. And then we were fortunate enough to have some even more extensive staff trainings, I would say, than we've had in previous years. So we have been able to have staff trainings that include food and a staff training. So staff can come. We have to do these trainings at night because we're running programming every day after school. So we've been able with this grant to have a meal and then staff training. So staff have been trained on food allergies that included EpiPens, trauma-informed care, supporting student needs, time to plan with each other around developing club and program activities, and then going through the youth program quality assessment at the same time to make sure they met those. And then lastly, we did submit a 21st Century Community Learning Center grant in March of 2025. We have had that grant for 11 years. That is what has funded the Greenville Park Community School, and that grant expires on August 31st. So maybe sometime in the next month, we will know if we were successful on that grant application. But in the meantime, as I mentioned before, we will have 50 people that are attending the national conference coming down for a visit to see our site as well, which will be really exciting. So then, this slide did not print out very well for you guys to see. Okay, you got it. Can you see in your packet? Okay. So this just reflects then how many have attended 1 hour plus and 50 hours plus. And so what our goals are, we're well on track to meet them. And it's exciting to have had this many students. I looked at it just today. Now I can't see the numbers on the bottom of yours, but we've had 249 students attend 50 plus hours as of today, 960 students attend 1+ hours. So I'm not sure how far that is off from what you're seeing, but that is where we're at as of today. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. Board members, any questions or comments?
I do. Thank you, Erin. If we look at slide 10, just on the general community ed fund balance, so I think you said those different pots were sort of, you can't mix and match.
Yep.
So does most of the revenue for the general ed community line come from the local sources? Look at that.
Okay.
Slide 8.
I want to make sure my slides are numbered different because we've got the whole packet together.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So is this the slide you're talking about?
Yeah. So
Yes. Yep. So are you asking if most of our local sources is driven by the general community ed? Yes. Yes. So for an example, if ECFE's, Val might be looking at exactly, ECFE's over each annual budget is about 250,000 to 300,000. School readiness is about 500,000. And screening, I want to say, is roughly 17 or 18. So yes, most of what you're seeing in funding sources, Val's going to tell how well my memory is right now.
It was very good. The total general community ed revenue for fiscal 25, so the revised budget, is 3.2, almost 3.3 million. And then 3.5 million in expenditures. So the vast majority is in the general community ed.
Okay, so then when we're going negative in that fund balance, that's just the revenue is driven by fees at that point to match the expenditures plus whatever we're spending now in the remaining like 83,000 of the fund balance, if I read that right.
Yeah, I could do some math on like what the actual percentage is, but the vast majority is local fees.
Okay. And amongst those, in terms of the local sources, then would include things like Kid Ventures plus any of the adult education. Like does it all go kind of in the same bucket?
Yep, all of them go into the same pot. When you really do divide them out, that's where I'm reflecting. When you would divide out all the program areas, early ventures is the one that is most concerning for the loss, but yes, they all go into that pot. So the things that all that were in that pot were the things that I mentioned that were the community education office, driver's education, youth and adult enrichment, youth and adult recreation, kid ventures, early ventures, Project Able, and youth development.
From a revenue and expenditure standpoint, that they're kind of all the things that sit in that
Yeah,
pot. or
they're all the things that sit in the general community ed pot.
Gotcha. That was my question. Thanks.
Good deal. Anyone else? Question or comment? Okay, Amy.
Erin, thank you for the report. I am always impressed with how big your umbrella is,
Thank you.
how many programs you oversee, how many employees you have, how many lives you impact. So a lot going on. My question is about the baby care and the toddler care. Have we considered increasing our prices?
Yes.
Well, and what would that mean? And, could we have scaling prices or what ideas have you thought about and what are you leaning toward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you remember, I don't expect you to remember this, but when I was here last year, the state legislature had just released their guidance that childcare should cost 7% of your household income. And at that time, so last year, roughly the household income in Northfield was $71,000 or $73,000. I think Northfield was $73,000. Rice County was $71,000. And last year, an infant slot at Early Ventures cost $16,000. So there was, the math is hard, right? We couldn't come anywhere near what the state guidance of having 7% of your income. And that would be if you had one child at childcare, where we're looking at families who oftentimes have more than one child at Early Ventures. At the same time, the reimbursement rates we saw between Dakota County and Rice County for those families that were accessing county childcare assistance were drastically different, which is a struggle when you're Northfield and you sit on the county line, right? And so we were looking at what a family would be reimbursed for living in Dakota County and attending Early Ventures versus what a family that would be reimbursed for living in Rice County and attending Early Ventures was drastically different. That hasn't changed in the last year, which does put our economically challenged families in a tough spot. So things we have looked at and is exactly what you're talking about. Do we scale it differently based on income? Do we charge what it actually costs, knowing both of these items could have a large impact on who we are serving? We also know there's a lot of demand out there for infant and toddler care. So we are in the process, Amy, of putting together some of these options and reviewing them with a team of people to get some feedback, because I think when you start talking people's childcare, it's a pretty personal thing. And so we want to review this with a host of people because it will have an impact. Whichever decision we end up going with will have an impact on people.
I wish you the best with that.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Comment or question? All right, thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Okay, item D is our policy committee recommendations, and Superintendent Hillman will present the committee's recommendations on policies 413, 421, 22, 427, 512, 704, and 906. These will be items for individual action at our May 27th meeting.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll let the policy changes stand as in the bulletin or as in the packet and ask if there are questions. This month's policies are a mix of some recommended updates from Minnesota School Boards Association and some of our regular cycle review. This year, we're really focusing on the 400s. So I'd be happy to take any questions about any of the proposed budget, or any of the proposed, we're talking a lot about budget, any of the proposed policy changes this evening.
Good. Great. You want to have a question? Okay, Jenny?
Thanks, Claudia. So I just have a question on policy 512. There was only one change made, it looks like. Can you explain why the one statement was removed?
Yes, so this is one of the latest recommendations from the Minnesota School Board Association. This policy was updated last summer after the legislature granted some greater, I would say, ownership of school-sponsored student publications content, if you will. And what they did is when they reviewed how they had wrote the policy initially, they felt that it actually conflicted. There was a line of argument that the policy, that line in the policy conflicted with the law that was adopted. So part of their regular internal review that they felt that that statement could create an issue for a district if there was some kind of suit that came about student content editorial oversight.
So it's mainly just liability, district liability reasons.
I would argue it's two things. I think number one, it would be to make sure that the policy aligns in the best way that they look at it with the law. And secondly, to protect districts from any kind of liability issues related to that.
Okay, thank you.
I have something on 512 as well while we're there. And I think I'm noticing two things. Does it say item 4 guidelines, and then if you skip down, does it say again item 4 time, place, manner, distribution?
You're right, it does.
Okay.
Good catch. I take care of that.
Well, I just noticed that now.
We'll also let Dr. Morrow know.
Okay, good. My question has to do with the I guess there's a place where it says administration, I'm sorry, let me find it. If somebody else has a question or a comment, I could look while you ask your.
Are you talking about or what would be time, place, and manner of distribution A?
Let me see if I can do a search. Okay, yes, item A. So I wanted to know, in that policy elsewhere, it talks about students are in grades 6 through 12. And so my question on that A would be, should it say something about site administration, or does it mean district administration? That the district will decide, or will the site administration decide?
I'm just looking at the top to see if we have defined administration, which does not look like that we have done.
If you look at G,
Yep.
student journalists in grades 6 through 12, and so since it's going across 3 different sites.
Yeah, so I think, Claudia, that could mean either, right? I think it could, honestly, time, place, manner. It could be either. So it could be the site level administration, which is likely what would happen here, right? But it also could be in some districts, it could be the district administration as well. So I think it's more of a universal in this case. Are you saying you'd like to make sure that we specify that a little bit more?
I mean, that's something to consider, to specify that, because there could be a conflict there if the site administration feels one way and the district administration perceives it a different way.
That language comes from the statute itself.
Okay.
So it's just, it says district, just for clarification. So under 121A.80, that's specifically where that language comes from. I don't know if that matters.
We typically don't like to mess when the statute is quoted in the, but I think it would be reasonable to explore putting something in the definitions about what does administration, and I would say that it could be either, right? That it might be the site administration in consultation with the district administration.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at is, it says administration, that could potentially create confusion, but
We'll
wanted to
add,
point that
we'll
out.
add it, and I think there's no harm in adding something to the definition. If that's what board members are okay with.
Any other questions or comments on any of the policies? Amy?
I have a couple of comments on policy 413 under the procedures. Where we do the definitions, we like for 1A, we say assault is, and then we have 1, 2, 3 underneath of that. I think we need to indicate more clearly that assault is one or more of those and not all of them. Just to, because someone could say, well, sure, we did number 1, but we didn't do number 2 or 3, so it's not actually assault. So if we could just clarify that, and then,
Amy, you'd like to see, something like a comma or at the end of 1, a comma or at the end of 2.
yes,
Comma or at least the first 2 there.
exactly. And under harassment as well, I think, putting the ors in.
Yeah, anything where there's a list that any one of the items would meet the definition, you'd like to make sure it's explicit that it's one of the 3, not all of the 3 together.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good.
And then also just on number 422, policy 422, I just want to remove the word model wherever it appears because model policy refers to the MSB policies and our policies are just policy. So if we could delete all the model in the policies, that would be great.
Thank you. That's a good catch.
Anyone else? Amy? On 422, those items that are stricken, how did that?
Yeah, these are recommendations from the MSBA policy. Actually, I believe in this case, it's a previous recommendation. When we look through, when our policy committee looks through policies that are just up for the regular cycle, we will often go and compare it to the MSBA red lines. That's the latest, what does the latest MSBA policy say? And if there are, over the years, our policies haven't always been in lockstep with MSBA, right? There were some that were developed for other reasons. There were some that previous superintendents brought from their school districts. So what we do is we take a look at what is MSBA's current recommendation, even if it's not brand new, and we align it to ours. And in this case, if you really look at this one, the policies incorporated by reference are saying that these following policies also apply to employees. And what happened here is there were some of these policies that already apply to employees. It wasn't the reverse of student policy that also applies to employees. So this is intended to clean it up, to get rid of policies that in this list that really don't need to be incorporated by reference. So it was our general housekeeping and looking at across what the current MSBA red line is. And we don't always recommend to you exactly what's in the MSBA model policy. We have a chance and many of them to make some choices about what we include and what we don't. But in this case, when we look back, we say, when we want to clean it up, we're just doing some housekeeping. So as many board members have said on other policies tonight, that it is clear as it possibly can if we have to use it.
Thank you. And I'll take the purpose statement there as an example. It seemed like several of the policies didn't have the purpose tied back to our strategic plan. Is the committee still interested in tying those purposes?
We are still working on that. And the trick is that the first round of them that we did when you were on the policy committee, very apparent, right? There's a lot of ability to really tie it in to the district vision. Then there are some that frankly we're doing jumping jacks to be able to figure out how to tie, and we want it to be authentic, right? We don't want it to be let's just make something sound good. And so I really think there are some policies that are just very technical. And when we're looking, I'm saying, how do we tie this? For example, Kelly and I have, how do we write the sentence to make it, this tie to the strategic plan? And sometimes it's just not worth it, right? Because it doesn't feel authentic. So we are doing that where we feel that there is the ability to really tie it back. And in some cases like this, that it's very much this is just really a technical piece. We're not doing it. We'll keep trying though, because we are fairly creative in how we can make sure that those things tie together.
Anyone else, question or comment? Okay, then we can move on. Okay, the next item is our consent agenda. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file that were added to that consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping?
So moved.
By Amy, thank you. Second? By Ben, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Item 7, we have 2 resolutions, and so Kelly will do a roll call vote. I will take a motion and then we can discuss. Motion a second, we'll discuss, and then Kelly can take the votes. The first resolution is resolution for termination and non-renewal of probationary licensed staff. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution for termination and non-renewal of probationary licensed staff listed in the memorandum effective at the close of 2024-2025 school year? Okay, moved by Ben. Second.
Second.
Second by Corey, thank you. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Any questions or comments? Okay, Ben?
Just, to recognize that this resolution and the next are obviously the culmination of many of the difficult conversations that we've had over the last several months. And so, just want to recognize that difficult choices and respect to those who it impacts. So just leave it at that.
Anyone else comment or question? All right, see none. Kelly, will you facilitate a roll call vote?
Butler,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Gorowitz,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
Aye. Motion passes. Next is the resolution proposing to place tenured licensed staff on unrequested leave of absence. Is there a motion? Moved by Corey. Is there a second on this resolution, this motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ben. Any question or comments from the board members on this resolution? Okay, seeing none, we will go to a vote. Kelly, will you facilitate?
Butler,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Gorowitz,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, item 8 is our enrollment report. These are items for information, and Superintendent Hillman will review the May 2025 enrollment report.
You have the May 2025 enrollment report in your packet. I will let the report stand and certainly take any questions people have about it.
Good. Questions, comments? Not this time. Okay. Item B is our graduation reminder. ALC graduation is scheduled at 6 p.m. on Friday, May 30th at the middle school auditorium. Our Northfield High School graduation is scheduled for 2 p.m. on Sunday, June 1st at the Memorial Field. Our future meetings are Tuesday, May 27th, as Monday is Memorial Day. 6 p.m. it's a regular meeting here in this boardroom. Thursday, May 29th, 5 p.m. is a closed board session in this boardroom. The meeting will be closed as permitted by Minnesota Statute 13D.03 to discuss labor negotiations. We also have a June 9th and a July 14th regular board meeting, 6 p.m. in this boardroom. That is all the business that we have tonight. I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Second? Thank you, Maggie. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.